Yes. Thank you very much for all coming back. That's always a good sign. The noise level in the coffee area was brilliant. So much so that the little bell that we're supposed to use to ask everyone to come back in was totally drowned out. So very good. Hope you enjoyed it. And so it gives me extreme pleasure to welcome Adam to the stage. Adam and I have known each other for a very, 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 very long time. We've worked together for many years. And he will obviously share his favourite film, which is always an interesting discussion. And he's going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've been learning over the last, I'd say, couple of years. So, Adam, over to you, my friend.
Everyone hear me? Yes, good. So favourite film. I did answer this last year, and I was thinking, should I change my answer? But actually, I'm going to stick with the same answer. So my favourite film is Jaws. There's multiple reasons. It was released the year I was born, so it's now 50 years old. Very, very scary. But it's it's a film of firsts. It was the first ever blockbuster. Before it, there was no such thing as a semi-blockbuster, and it changed the film industry. And actually, that's kind of where we are as well. We're right at an inflection point that's so disruptive, so changing at the moment. I've never experienced it in the decades that Paul and I have worked together. So, first, I'm not going to say anything to start with about science or technology or process or data. A small fact, that's me, on track at Donington Park in the UK. I looked at the date of the photo and I was a little bit sad. It's almost 10 years ago. Sad. I used to love riding, I still do, but I was never that good. So, what's the purpose of showing you a video of the Isle of Man TT? Well, for me to envisage doing something like that, it's a gap that is so wide. The gulf is enormous. I've ridden that track, but nowhere near that speed. Nowhere near that speed. And to be able to get there, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to get on a bigger bike. Oh, I'm going to get some new kit. you have to totally transform the way that you would approach it. We've been trying to do that for many years. Lab of the future. Have we ever got there? For many people, this is a snapshot of Lab of the future. Something where we're bringing some information together, we're connecting our devices, we're working with our systems, we're talking about data. And we've got marginal improvements, in some cases, significant improvements. But have we really changed our organizations? We heard some comments about that today. What we didn't hear is some of the aspirational comments that companies are making statements about. Time to market, cut by 70%. Reduce my product cycle times from 18 months to 6 months, but retaining the same quality as I have today. So how are we going to do that if we're just upgrading a system? We're connecting two things together. Are we going to get 40, 50, 60, 70% improvements? Are we going to get 10x, 100x, 1000x? No, we're not. We're not. So we have to make a completely different change. So we want to be able to work with what we have and bring it together in a completely different viewpoint. But in order to talk about this and think about it in a different way, we need to kind of go back to basics. So let's talk about DMTA. Design, make, test, analyze. This is kind of the model that many people have worked towards for a long time. I design, I make, I test, I analyze, and I cycle round. It's supposed to be a cycle. I would argue that it's not actually a cycle, it's a linear process that you may then feed back into at the end. The laser-eyed amongst you will notice there's a fifth one in here. So that fourth icon after test is collect, retrieve, bring together, because that's what we spend a lot of time doing. But we heard from Magda, have you eliminated spreadsheets? 8 out of 10. Well done, bravo. Usually it looks a bit more like this though. Design, spreadsheet. Notebook, spreadsheet. Inventory, spreadsheet. Instrument, data, spreadsheet. Back to notebook, database. Oh, analysis, sign off, complete. Still linear. Every single time do this, then move to the next one, then move to the next one, then move to the next one. In order for us to break this cycle, we have to think differently. We don't have to think about going from one step to the next, and trying to improve that cycle. What we actually need to do is we need to think about how we can interconnect that cycle. We shouldn't think about going from design to make. We shouldn't think about having to do analysis before we can go back into design. Everything should interconnect. We need to break away from linear process thinking. Not process optimization, not process redesign, process revolution. Complete and utter change of what you're doing to make sure that you can get to these big aspirational goals. So we're now actually in a world where technology is suddenly making this very, very huge, abstracted vision a reality. Let's put a brain in the middle of our DMTA cycle and allow it to interconnect. And what's that brain? AI. AI is the answer to everything, right? We just put it in, and we can completely disrupt and break the DMTA cycle. Okay, look, that's not strictly true, but it enables capabilities that we've only been dreaming about maybe even 2 years prior. Asking questions that support the scientist, scientific assistance, scientific process change, enabling a different way of working. That's what the technology part of PDOT is actually starting to allow us to do. But as we heard today from Arndt, don't just digitize, lift and shift a process. You have to completely rethink it. So what we need to do is we need to think how we can go from 1 to 10. Instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, how do we get from 1 to 7? How do we do that? One such scenario could be that at stage 1, it tells you what you should be doing before you even start. Have you tried this? I recommend you do this. This is the way that you should set up your experiment. Not following the formulaic method that people have been following, in some cases, for decades. So we heard, again, a statement today about the center of the universe, the center of the scientific world, very often being a data management system, a LIMS, an ELN. How's about thinking it in a different way? That you're actually thinking about something where a user can say what you would like to do, set up an experiment, set up a request, do a run. Tell me what projects I should be working on. Ask more questions, get more insight, go and get my stuff, bring it back. Oh, would you like to do a design of experiments? Would you like to have some insight in what you should be doing? If you're doing that, change what comes back. Change what I'm looking for. Don't do it based on set formulas, set input. You don't necessarily know what you're doing when you start. That's what science is all about, exploration. If we can't explore because digital systems are constraining us, how on earth are we going to do significantly different, improved, better science? If we're following a formula, a formulaic method, a form, we cannot adapt in the way that we want. Science is not linear. In some cases it is, but generally speaking, it's adaptive, it's ad hoc. Create my records, don't bother having to do it yourself. Connect to my instrumentation landscape, retrieve information automatically, format data for me automatically. Publish that data into a nice, clean data source, as mentioned this morning. Bring in scientific language models, bring in industry expertise, internally, externally, aggregate the information, allow the scientist to interact dynamically, not based on preset methods. What are the process parameters I should be working to? Not, these are the ones that I've been using for the last 5 years. What should I be working to? Tell me, assist me, facilitate my work. Reporting, compliance, validation, all inherently built into what you do, not retrospective. Allow information to be proactively pushed right at the beginning of the process. So before you even start, tell you what you need to be knowing so that you can run the right experiment, run the right process. And bringing it into an overall framework that has an AI core allows us to then start thinking about wider expanse of what's possible with the organizational information that we're obtaining. Allow us to look at costs, allow us to look at environmental impact, allow us to look at sustainability, because it's all by design. It's in what we do as we're working. It's not a secondary retrospective step that needs to be built and executed painfully by people who think that this is a task that isn't just part of their standard work. Democratization, incentivization, onboarding of people to bring this into what they do needs to be seamless. Can't be an overhead Otherwise, you don't get the buy-in. The buy-in is what will make something like this successful. So, I'll have questions. But my challenge to you is look at a process that you work with, or multiple processes. Have they been designed in a linear way today? And really think about that. You might think it's not linear, but is it? Has it been designed in a linear way? Can you reimagine that process? Can you look at it to think, how could we actually not just optimize this, how could we change it? How could we revolutionize that process to allow us to change the way the science is actually done? Mark, I'm sorry, I'll challenge the statement of science is done the same every single time. Agreed on some areas, but when we're in, discovery, early development, and we're kind of going here, there, and everywhere, we want to have adaptability, change, flexibility. So we need both. We need the ones that are done the same every single time, and we need the ones that are dynamic. We've got both ends of the spectrum, and we would love to be able to bring these together so that we have this reimagining of process. So, can you reimagine, or can you revolutionize something that you have in your scope today? And if so, how do you think that would look? What would it look like? Little teaser here, you might get asked a question on this later on. So be prepared to react to my question to all of you. There's a huge amount of content, a huge amount of information, and a huge amount of thought-provoking that's in that previous slide. I'm not expecting everybody to just go, yep, got it, let's do something, understood, mission briefed, on we go. But to start to think about the way that we could use what we have available today to reimagine the way that people are working so that digital facilitates science, that should be our objective. We're trying to bring the wet and the dry lab closer together, and we need to see how we can facilitate that ongoing. And it's not a single step. This is a multi-step, multi-year journey that we're all on, and everyone here is going to contribute towards it. So with that, thank you very much, and I'll take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. That's me again. I think we all realize that historically we've been really biased when we design the digital capabilities by what is already there, what the physical world looks like. And I think we all acknowledge that with the change which is happening right now, it has to look differently. The thing is, we don't know how, right? So my question to you is really like provocative, actually. If you had an opportunity to build the whole research center, R&D center from scratch right now, zero foundations, just the field, the money, the builders, everything, and what would you do differently? How would you design the lab of the future, having all the resources, no limitations now from scratch? Thank you.
You've reversed a question that I asked at a conference last year. And it was a bit disappointing because the answers actually weren't hugely inspiring. But so for me, I would look to see how I can, or how we can, break the way that we've been trained to work as scientists. So I'm originally a biologist, and from as early as I can remember, the way to do science was taught. You know, we hypothesize, we write up our methods, we experiment, we write down our conclusions, and we submit. And it varies a little bit, but that's the way you're conditioned as a scientist. You have to do it like this. So what could you do? You could walk into the lab. It goes, hey, Adam, you know, how you doing today? I can see you're supposed to be doing an HPLC. Would you like me to grab the materials for you and put them at your workstation? Yep, great, I'll do that. Oh, we haven't got this amount of stock. Would you like me to order it for you? Yes, please. That is how I would expect to be able to work, is that you're a part of the digital lab. Okay, so the lab isn't facilitating you in the sense of, oh, I'm just optimizing these connections, or I'm just making sure that I can run this a bit faster. It's facilitating the way that you need to operate as a scientist. So it's a bit of a woolly answer, but ultimately it's the lab is aware of me and I can interact with it. That's how I would design a lab of the future.
Thanks a lot for provoking quite a lot of thoughts here. One thing I'm missing in your slides is knowledge. So we all know how to handle data. It's even in PDOT strategy already well established. But how, like maybe coming back from the point of how long it took us to get data under control, and we are still not yet there, what do we need to do with our knowledge or information? Like, for me, that's the clear core of all of those cycles. We need to have it there, and I'm pretty sure that written reports in Word or Google Docs is not the answer. So what's your take on that?
Fantastic question, and I think the context of what we do, so essentially the colleagues that you have is your organizational knowledge in a large part. There's kind of aspirations and conversations that we've been having, not just in our space, but outside of the space, is wouldn't it be fantastic if we could have an assistant or a resource, whatever it may be, that has all of the knowledge that we've ever collected. But it actually goes beyond that, and Paul mentioned it today. The O of PDOT, we quite often think about our own department, our own group, our own company even, but that's only a tiny piece of what's there. There's all of the academic information, there's all the collaborators' information. One could argue that's still part of your overall organizational asset, but what really pushes the needle with regards to confirming a hypothesis with regards to something that's coming into one of us is the human data, the patient data, the information that's available everywhere. That's the biggest challenge, is bringing all of that in as knowledge so that you can speak about what you do internally, but also being able to compare, assess, and analyze and infer and ultimately reason through modeling based on that information. So the knowledge needs to come in as an overall data collective. Our scientific data is just a part of that, but it also needs to be contextualized with what people know. It's not just the numbers and images and tables of data that come from experiments. Yeah, so it's a part, but you need to think about it just beyond the experimental data.
Thank you. Oh, okay, thank you for a very nice talk. I'm Nicole. I'm very excited by everything that's going on in the field. I was wondering, how do you feel about the future if you think about the prediction accuracy in the orchestration layer going up, maybe work packages also going up? Do you maybe already see companies where the bottleneck starts to be the physical capability of the R&D?
So we were actually talking about exactly this topic last night, and I think there was also a mention earlier on about pinch points. So going back to that sort of organizational view, and what Magda was actually talking about this departmental-centric, group-centric tribes, very often we try to improve our own tribe. We'll look at how do we get better? How do we do that better? Going at one organizational level, maybe an entire modality, you can say, right, we're collectively doing what we need to do. But that has to be the process, it has to be the data, it has to be the organization and the technology. And if we don't do the organization piece, which ultimately is the people at the bench, we could enable the best tooling, we could have the best data strategy, we could have the right knowledge, but if the bench scientist doesn't actually know how to use that, they don't actually get empowered to improve what they're doing day to day, that's where the bottleneck's going to be. So the upskilling, the onboarding, the incentivization, all of the things that we've already heard about in terms of getting people on board with this is probably the biggest, scariest challenge we've got, because this is wholesale change. It's for everybody. But we have to prove it in certain spots. So we have to prove it and then show, as Arndt very nicely demonstrated in his PPPD instead of P dot, or PPPT, that's right, or P, anyway, the one that was missing the O, right in the middle he had value. And everything actually has to tie back to value, and it's value to the scientist, which ultimately drives value to the business. So yes, it's a huge change program, otherwise that's where we'll create the bottleneck.
Last question then.
So I actually have a question about those agents in your diagram. So I'm visiting Basel right now, and I asked the agent recommend what to do in Basel when you're a family with an 8-year-old, and it gave fantastic suggestions. It even pointed out which places we should discover on Monday, because on Mondays most of places are closed.
Yep.
And the ones that were recommended were actually all closed on Monday. So this is kind of like a low-cost thing. I go to Google Maps and I verify that. But if I have my parameters recommended to me, and those parameters are actually the wrong ones to focus on, this is actually going to cost us a lot of money.
Yes.
So how future is this future? Because we need certain level of determinism and ability to rely on those answers.
Epic question, Magda. I didn't seed it, but thank you for asking the question. So this is where the concept of the scientific language or the domain language model come in. So you're absolutely right. If we're thinking about the power of generative AI and LLMs, for example, they're actually really, really good at quite generic stuff, and they're quite good at getting you a certain percentage of the way. But then it sort of stops. And if it's something like visiting an attraction, what's the impact? Maybe an annoyed kid and you have to buy an extra ice cream. So all good. But if it's a process parameter is set incorrectly, and that costs you an entire 2-week bioreactor run at 100 grand, then the impact is 100 grand or more. Further on in the chain, if it's actually an impact with regards to something that gets released incorrectly, then catastrophic potential impact. So what we're asking, or what we're integrating with in terms of suggestion, proactivity, push rather than pull, and ultimately actually being able to work through something, has to be bound by the quality of the data, the guardrails that we put around it, and actually something Mark mentioned this morning, which is the governance that sits around it. AI governance is going to be 1000% critical to actually making this a reality. But we are also still learning about all of this. And to start with, it's very much the scientist is front and center of all the decision making. It's facilitating. Ultimately, you could get to the point where you start to take a bit of a step back, but only when you're super confident and you've actually approved that everything is doing what it should be doing.